So, I really want to tell this story that just unfolded and all connected in my brain about how our thoughts create our reality. Like, how does that actually happen? And this is a very real, very real story of how that's happened. And so I'm going to start at the beginning and tell the story of my windows on my house. And I would love it. I know a lot of you like are super into symbolism and meaning and like all of that, like I am. Like, what is the symbolism of this story to you? I would love to hear that. Um, so, my windows on my house. So, this is deep, my friends. This is a deep one because I feel like our lives are a reflection of our inner self, of our inner knowing of who we are and what we know to be true. And our life shows us what we know to be true. And so, the long story short version is that when I moved into my house that I've lived in since July of 2017, the windows howled. They like made this whistling sound. And it's very windy, and my house is kind of on top of a hill. And so there's not a whole lot of like trees for windbreaks, and I'm up high, and the wind is just crazy sometimes. And the windows howl in the wind. They whistle. They make like literal whistling noises and they're loud. And this is disruptive on a number of levels. Most of all, if I'm trying to sleep, that's when it's the worst. But otherwise, like if I'm trying to record something or do a Zoom or whatever, the noise is just like maddening, especially when it's like usually it's a windy day. So it's like on and on and on all day long. The windows are whistling. So I put up with it for maybe like a month or two when I first moved here. And then I called the local guy in town, the window guy, and he came out here and he like looked all around at my windows, and wouldn't you know it, it's like not a windy day, and so he didn't even get to experience like what was really going on. And he like looked at him and he basically said like, well, I don't know, like I don't really know. I think you just need some new windows. These aren't very high quality windows. They're letting air come through and they're not sealed up good, and you just need some new windows. And so I asked him like, how much is that? And like thousands of dollars to put new windows on this house. Thousands of dollars that at that time, almost 6 years ago, I did not have and still don't and haven't had in the last 6 years. So for 6 years, I've been listening to these windows howl at me every time it's windy outside for 6 years. And then fast forward to like a week ago, it was whistling. It had been whistling all day. And again, it was maddening. It was just like getting me so frustrated that I just like can't take it anymore. And so I go over there and I start just like pushing on different places. Like sometimes like when you just don't know what to do, you just start banging something against it. Like I'm just pushing on different parts of the windows, and I find that yeah, when I push on this part right here, I can make the whistling stop. Whoa, that's the first time in 6 years I've ever been so frustrated by it that I've ever even tried to see, like, can I figure out exactly where the whistling is happening? And I did. I found, like, okay, so if you push on this part, then it doesn't whistle. And so that part I figured out. And then I'm telling my mom about it, and she's like, well, can you like wedge something in there so that like that will stay pushed how you did that? Like, and I come home and I look and it's not, there's nowhere to like wedge anything that I can see, but I'm like, maybe Dolly can see. She's good at like MacGyvering solutions to things like this. So yeah, like I call Dolly. I'm like, hey, can you come look at this? And so I tell her and I show her, and it's still whistling. And so she starts like pulling it apart, and like these little clippy things that I never even noticed, and she pushes on them and she's got the whole window like pulled back out of the frame. And she's looking at it. And so she pushes, like the part that moves is the bottom half of the window, and the top part stays there. And like you just put the bottom part down and you can lock it. And she's like, well, actually, I noticed that these locks, they've never engaged. Like you can't lock the window. And it's because she's telling me it's because this part is just too low. It's like a quarter inch lower than where it should be. But the part that goes up and down, like we've got it all the way down. So then she figures out that this top part needs to go up to make those match up. And so she's like got the bottom half completely out of the frame, and she's pushing up on the top half, and she gets it to slide up that quarter inch. Like it moves when she pushes on it, and then she puts the bottom half back in there and locks it, and it locked, and the windows don't whistle anymore. That's it. The top half wasn't in there right, and just need to push it up and then lock the window, and it doesn't whistle anymore. That's it. That's all. Not thousands of dollars. Not me living with something driving me fucking crazy for 6 years because I can't afford new windows. This thought created my reality for 6 years. This thought, this knowing it to be true that I can't afford new windows. I can't afford new windows. I don't have the money for that. Are you kidding me? Thousands of dollars for windows? Like who has that money? No, not me. I guess I got to live with this whistling. I guess this whistling is just my fate. I'm just like destined to listen to this whistling until I lose my fucking mind. Like that's just where I am. And do you know what happened? Do you know what happened when I even like so before the part where I'm like so fucking sick of the whistling that I have to go over there and just like push on it and see like if, like what is this? Like what is wrong here? I the part that even preceded that is again how I know for a fact that thoughts create our reality, because here recently, a couple weeks ago, I went through almost 3 weeks ago now, I guess, but I went through and I quoted a job. I put together a bid package as far as like I would charge this much money and I would do this scope of work and we would make this trade and you would get a store and I would get this paycheck. And I did that, and the way I structured it was a very good deal for me. It let me do a lot of things that were important in my life. And one of those things that I would be able to afford is I was going to save $6,000 out of the money that I was going to make off this project. I was going to set aside $6,000 to be able to buy new windows, to be able to put new windows in this house. And I am relatively confident that, like, yes, I could have that job if I wanted it. And so then I started, like, really living inside this reality where I could afford windows and I could afford this and I could afford this. And like, it completely changed, like, how I thought about all of these things. Like, they felt so much more in reach at that point. And so about a week after after quoting that job and putting together this spreadsheet where I saw like, okay, so if I made this money, I would pay this towards my mortgage and I would pay that off faster and I would pay this towards the money that I owe to my parents and I would pay this towards like this savings account where I could set aside this money to, go towards these new windows. I could set aside this money to go towards a new car. I could set aside this money. Like I could do all of that. And then once I lived inside the reality where I can afford new windows, it might take a little bit of time, but like I'm going to get some new windows and I'm not going to have to live like this anymore. Woohoo! Like I was so excited that like there's an end in sight. There's an end in sight. I can afford windows. I now live in a world where I can afford windows. And because I had that tied to this experience with the whistling, like I found out right off the bat when I moved in that the whistling is caused because I needed new windows. That's what the window expert told me. And I believed what they said. And so now I live in a world where I need new windows. The instant reaction to that is I can't afford it. And so now I live in a reality where I have to suffer because I can't afford new windows. And so what flipped was this job and quoting it the way I did and setting myself up to like, if I took that job, that I would be able to afford new windows. I'd be able to pay off my mortgage. I'd be able to do all of these things that weren't previously available to me. And now I live in a reality where I can afford that stuff. And then a 100% free solution presented itself. I mean, it took Dolly like 30 minutes to go around and like push up the top half of all the windows, and now none of them whistle. Now there's not all this extra air coming into my house that's making my, temperature control have to work harder in the winter and the summer, like raising my electric bill. Like I wanted to do all of these things so that I could have a more peaceful quality of life inside this house, but also like make it more energy efficient. I'd have to like put the new windows on or whatever. And now, like, here I am with this solution, with this free solution that helps on my energy efficiency. It helps it be more peaceful inside the house. I'm no longer dreading the next windy day because I'm going to have to like figure out like, do I want to sit in the house and like listen to that? Like, I work from home. So if it's a windy day, that's all day of like listening to that whistling sound. Or do I want to be gone, go somewhere else and make other arrangements to be elsewhere so that I don't have to listen to it, because it does drive me up the wall. And so the windows, like, oh my God, like, what is this symbolism? What is this? Like, what does this connect to? Because I lived inside a reality where I suffered over the whistling of the windows for years, over half a decade. I suffered in this space because of the thought, I can't afford new windows. It shut down every exploration towards what might have been free solutions. Like, I didn't even think that a free solution was possible. I stopped completely exploring a free solution because the expert told me you need new windows and I can't afford those. So I'm just screwed. How often are we doing this to ourselves is what I want to know. How often am I letting myself suffer because I can't afford what the expert said I needed? And instead of continuing to search, instead of continuing to say, no, I do need that, and I don't have the money to pay for it, so there must be a solution that doesn't require the money to pay for it, right? Like, there must be a way to get that need met within the resources that I have because I deserve to have my need met. That's all. Like, I thought that like back in the day 6 years ago when the expert came and told me like you need new windows, like I felt, this is where I say this gets really deep, because I felt like a fool for buying this house. This particular house I bought sight unseen. I had never stepped foot in it before I bought it. And so I was going on faith. That was like my leap of faith. I trusted the universe, because the reason I bought this house was because I moved to Kansas from Texas to open a grocery store in my hometown. And five months before I started working on the grocery store, 7 months before I moved back, I had quit my job because I knew that my business is ready for me. I have no idea where that business is. I have no idea what that business is, but I know it's ready for me, and kind of Field of Dreams style, if you build it, they will come. So I left my job and I was like making myself available. I was resting up. I took several really awesome vacations with this really extended period of R&R to like refill my tank so that I was like in the best shape of my life, energetically, rest-wise, to be able to tackle this new business that was absolutely ready for me. And 5 months after I left my job, my business partner called and proposed this grocery store in our hometown in Kansas. And that would require me to move back to my hometown. And 2 months later, I did that into this house. And so I was resting on faith through all of that, that this was the right decision. This was the right path to go on. And because it's such a small town, housing is like a game of musical chairs. Like, it's not like there's a ton of properties that are just sitting there. And so, in terms of being able to find something that was so close, specs wise, to what I wanted, being out in the country, having lots of space around the house, and having, a couple different bedrooms, and I knew those kinds of details about the house, but I'd never walked inside of it. I'd never been on the property. Like, and here I am. Yes, I want it. I'll buy it. And so to do that was a huge act of trust in that I'm doing the right thing. And to have almost no physical evidence that I'm doing the right thing, but to trust myself anyway and to move forward. And then to get in the house, that first windy day, I felt like my leap of faith was taunting me. I felt like this whistling in these windows is gonna drive me crazy. And this is what you get for trusting the universe, you silly, silly girl. Like, I had all kinds of those kinds of stories about how this was proving that, see, like, this is why you shouldn't trust yourself. Like, that, it was proof. It was proof of that. And then to have the expert come and say that, yep, you need new windows. Like, to be told that after you just bought this house and you didn't know and you didn't really check and all of that kind of stuff. And then the solution is that you need to pay thousands of dollars to fix this problem that you didn't even take the time to do your due diligence. Like, I felt like the universe was punishing me. That's how I felt. And so I've been living in this space of letting myself be punished for that mistake for these last 6 years. Every time those windows whistle, I think to myself, like, yep, that's what you get. In over your head, like usual, like, look at you, like, totally wagging my finger in my own face. And then, the Aries new moon happened, and I bid this job in a way that I've would never have thought to do before, which was to really price my services at what they're worth, instead of giving all these discounts and, price breaks and all of that, so that they'll say yes, so that I can actually sell the job. I'm not worried about selling the job. I'll price my services at what they're worth. And then I moved myself, like, I energetically did this move into this reality where I can afford things now, like saving up money to buy new windows, saving up money to replace my heating and air system because it sucks. What if it sucks because the windows are basically dumping in all of this outside air? And so now my heating and air system has to work twice as hard to try to keep up, and it really can't. It never has done a very good job of controlling the temperature inside the house. But what if it's because of this? And so on that spreadsheet, I had carved out these savings accounts where I had basically like $6,000 saved for the windows, and I had $6,000 saved for the heating and air system, specifically the heat system, because in the wintertime especially, it just sucks. But again, like, I'm freezing the house with that outside air and then trying to pay for the heat to heat it back up, all because because I can't afford new windows. This is how a thought creates our entire fucking reality. It's insane. And I cannot believe, like, I just am so overjoyed to get to see this, to get to see Dolly spend these 30 minutes pushing that top half up that half inch. And I mean, it probably wasn't even 30 minutes. Like, take this out, push this up, put this back in, lock the window, problem solved. Do the next one, however many windows there are on the house. They all needed it. They were all letting air in, all of them. So, all of that to say, now here's $12,000 that I was going to save so that I could make upgrades to this shitty house that I bought. And I not only does that free up that $12,000, you don't have to spend that, but you didn't buy a bad house. There's nothing wrong with this house. There's nothing wrong with this house. You didn't buy a bad house. I've been sitting here for 6 years. kicking myself over the lemon of a house that I bought, and how, like, yeah, you should have done better. You should have done more due diligence. You should have, like pointing the finger at myself. You messed it up and this is what you get. I've been tolerating punishment for that mistake for 6 years. And now to see that there was no mistake, there wasn't even a mistake. There was a small issue that the expert couldn't find. And instead of trusting myself that I deserved better than this, I trusted that expert who told me that to fix it's going to cost you thousands of dollars. And I gave up. My main takeaway, and I would love to hear yours, my main takeaway is, where else am I doing this? Where else am I doing this? Where else am I doing this? Where else am I letting myself be punished for no reason? Where else am I doing this? Dear friend, thank you so much for listening. I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Until next time, I hope you are taking such radically awesome care of yourself, that you are snipping any punishment that you are receiving in the bud, and so will I.